What's up, Embody? I'm thrilled to welcome back to the Yours Truly podcast a return guest, the one and only Kale Zeldin. Our first conversation was one of my earliest podcasts, where Kale graciously joined me to discuss worship and liturgy. It was a beautiful and deeply meaningful experience for me, especially since Kale took a chance on a relatively unknown personality in this space. For that, I'm very thankful. Kale is a secondary school educator specializing in teaching the great works of literature. He has also spent time as an education administrator. Kale is an active participant in TLC, this little corner of the internet, and has co-hosted Paul Vanderklay's Friday morning live streams. He runs his own Substack and podcast, both titled The Underneath, and recently featured author Paul Dreer as a guest. Kale's Twitter account has over 4,000 followers, and I can attest to his expertise on that platform. I've invited Kale back to yours truly today to discuss education, a topic that has become a secondary interest of mine in recent years. After going back to college to start a new career just over 5 years ago, and having my mother as an educator in the public school system, I've always been closely watching my own kids navigate this increasingly complex system we call education. I'm eager to dive into what I know will be a fascinating and intense conversation filled with thoughtful, considerate, and passionate insights from Kale. So, without further delay, I present to you the amazing Kale Zeldin. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. And we're back.
Christian, how are you today?
I'm good, man. Good. Yeah. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, it's good. It's just taught a load of classes today, and yeah, it's a good day. It's a good day. The sun's out.
Wrapping up the week.
Yeah, we're not only are we wrapping up the week. I have I don't know if you knew this, but I teach on Saturdays as well.
Oh, no.
And so I have class tomorrow, but it's the last day of classes. And then so we do classes, and we have prize day on Saturday night. Then we have commencement on Sunday, massive commencement on Sunday morning. And then while everybody else is doing the Memorial Day thing, we have our first day of exams. And so we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday exams, and we're done. So anyway, so this is a little of a busy weekend, but that's okay. I'm kind of on top of things and feeling pretty good. And, when you said, hey, like, let's talk about stuff, I said, man, let's go. Why not? And so, yeah.
Well, that even speaks to it right there. Just that, you do some school on Saturday, and then your commencement is tied to worship.
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah. So we have, we're a boarding school, and so we bring the kids to mass on Sundays. So, and we have class on Saturdays. So it's literally, yes, Paul, literally,
really,
it's actually a 7-day week here. So, when school's in session, it's go, which might explain why when I'm in the middle of the school year, my posting schedule is pretty light. Sorry, just gonna put that out there. It's a total excuse, but yeah. So anyway, so really busy, but we've had a really long cold spring here, so the sun is finally out. It's like 70 degrees out there today, so this is like sort of the first few days in which it's been nice. Although, as you know, I'm from Louisiana, and we had it was Thursday, so it was yesterday. We had one of those like Louisiana, Arkansas, everything's cleared. All of a sudden, these bands move through and like pour like a pitcher of water on everybody. It was wild with thunderstorms and everything. It felt like home, so it was pretty cool.
So you don't get like humid storms like that very often.
Not those humid storms, not those ones that roll in. Like I grew up in Louisiana, and like there were certain stretches of summer where it would happen every afternoon, 2-3 o'clock, and then it'd be sunny again by 4 and steamy and all that sort of thing. So no, we don't get those very often. So it was a pretty cool experience. If people were freaking out, it was funny.
Man, when you were talking about your week, it was just bringing to mind a couple of things that even just the nature that you're in a boarding school, not only private school, but a boarding school. It's a unique feature of culture. And my wife's family, all three, she has 3 other siblings, and they all went to a Lutheran boarding school, Missouri Synod
Wow.
uh, through from ninth grade through 12th grade, about
Yeah. Yeah.
5
Yeah.
hours away. So I got a little bit because I was dating my wife in high school, and I was just
Yeah.
like, "What is
What
this
what
thing?"
what is going on here? Yeah, yeah. It's funny. Growing up in Louisiana, my only real conception of boarding school were for, and this was like, this is not true, but this is what I thought growing up, is either mom and dad, either you were in trouble, and so they were sending you away, or they just didn't kind of want you. So when I encountered this whole New England boarding school thing, I had seen New England boarding school movies and that kind of stuff, but I had really had no reference point beyond the movies. And no, it's a cool thing, man. It's definitely a culture up here of, there people go to boarding school, and not everybody, of course, but it's definitely not unheard of, and it's really expensive. But I have to say, as someone who's worked in this particular vineyard for finishing up my 17th school year, it's a cool thing. I mean, it's a total experience, because kids have to go to school from 8:15 to 3, and then everybody has sports, from 3:30 to 5:30, and then you go to dinner, and then you have a break, and then you go to study hall, and then you lights out. So it's a total environment. And I don't know what I was doing at 4 o'clock on a random Thursday in high school, but it probably wasn't good. And I can say here at boarding schools, the kids are, they're at practice, or they're at a game, or they're at the play practice, or doing community service, or whatever it is they're signed up to do. So it's and then just from a school standpoint itself, I mean, I have, I have a couple of sections of my classes, 15 kids apiece, so it's a real amazing, privilege to be able to teach at in this kind of environment. So no, it's pretty special, honestly.
Yeah. It Yeah, I have friends whose kids also have done a lot of interesting homeschool that if it's that have wanted to connect that to more of like a classical education.
Sure.
And like I mentioned in the intro, my mom is a public school educator.
Hmm.
I was a public school kid in
Yeah.
Arkansas.
Yeah.
Um, and then like I said, like my wife's family, she actually went to the public school. That's where we met really, but
Mhm.
it's I mean, I'll give a little bit of, I think, part of the this is just my perspective on it. I
Yeah.
think, like my in-laws were influenced by, I'll just say evangelicalism in the 80s and
Mhm.
90s.
Mhm.
And there was a big push for Christian education.
Yeah. But
Within
which is
that.
so funny, right? Because I know Paul talks about this in terms of the Christian Reformed tradition, and they have a whole, school system. And Catholics, of course, had the parochial school system, and there was an early cardinal. Get his name, must have been Cardinal Carroll or somebody like this, and we're talking like in the 1850s,
Mm,
60s, thereabouts. Basically, made it not a law, but strongly recommended that if you were Catholic, you would send your kids to a Catholic school.
yeah,
And in part, that made sense, right? Because the American public school system was really actually, a Protestant school system. Just didn't have, they call it a public school system, but it really was American, sort of Protestantism. So I do kind of understand that. So it's interesting that in the 80s, the evangelicals, sort of make a move away from public education and into Christian education. So it's an
yeah.
interesting dynamic there.
It is, and that was even, I think there's also a piece that my mother-in-law was raised Catholic and a
Hmm.
very Catholic. She didn't go to boarding school because it was in the city, but it was a Catholic school within the city. And there's certain things in your life, we all make decisions that are the influences, they come from all sorts of places. And so,
Yeah.
that's been my experience with that. I was wondering kind of your perspective on education as a whole. Like, I don't know, like primary and secondary education as a whole. And I'll tell you my kind of um, very rudimentary perspective. I liked school. I liked learning.
Mhm.
It wasn't, most of it wasn't extremely difficult for me in certain ways. And, it's like that positive feedback, and then, but I liked history a lot, and I
Mhm.
liked, parts of science, math not so much, English was okay.
Mhm.
Uh, but I remember it was like mid 2000s or I guess later 2000s. I think uh, for the public school systems, you may because I don't know how much you kind of keep up with these, but with legislation,
Mhm.
uh, they they took out the requirement for social studies from under a certain age. Are you aware? Does that sound ring a bell for you?
Yeah, because they were trying to align certain kind of national standards, is that right?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was it called?
No Child
Common.
Left Behind, the Common Core, yeah. Yeah, yeah, so I remember that. Yeah, I was definitely sort of following that. Yeah,
That shocked me. I
yeah,
was
yeah.
in my young 20s, but, like, my favorite subject getting kinda subjugated to kind of to STEM, but I kind of saw it as I mean, I from, more of a skeptical, like, we're trying to we were trying to erase history, that type of thing, like
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I can get kind of meta on this one. I mean, I think
yeah,
the American school establishment has been under the spell of John Dewey since forever. I don't know the exact dates, but I want to say it's the early 20th century, and he's the sort of the grandfather of progressive education, and really was the far and away the great voice of American education. And as a progressive educator, we tend to hear the word progressive and think immediately left wing politics. At least I do. But it's a little bit. There's a little bit of nuance to there, but it's basically the idea that progressive education is oriented toward the practical, right? Back it's funny. Back in the in the 19th century, there were all these arguments about, and this is very Karl Marx stuff, and a bunch of people talk about it, but, is it, should you be focused on Shakespeare or Boots? Right, with the idea being, should you be focused on art and experience and literature and those sorts of things, philosophy, or should you be focused on, creating people to make boots, again, as a sort of a stand-in for practical, for the practical, something like that. And I think in America, the those that argued for boots won. And so, so even those subjects that you and I would like, history, I like history and English and those sorts of things as well. Um, those became subordinated to prac the practical end of um, basically training a workforce, right? And so there's always, at least the way I see it. And so anyway, I come out of a sort of a very anti-Deweyan school. And in part, the Great Books movement, starting in Chicago and other places, was an attempt to kind of say, well, actually, a humanistic education should not just be the domain of the privileged, but it actually should be something that is scaled out. So it's a kind of a counter, in some sense, a kind of countervailing voice against the sort of the hyper pragmatism of the progressives. And although there's some nuance to that too, but anyway, that's the basic, as I see it, that's the basic thing. So it was so interesting to watch the education arguments of the 90s and the 2000s, that that I frankly always felt that neither the sort of the American left wing nor the American right wing had any real positive vision of an education. It was just, which type of job are you trying to train the force for? And so, you think of like small government, pro business Republicans, they were really concerned with, you should run education like a business. And like, well, I get what you're sort of saying, but that's not really what education is. And then the progressives, of course, were trying to usher in the revolution on some level, and that's what they continue to do. And very clearly, at least the way that I see it, the progressives won massively. And so now, the sort of that Deweyan vision gets merged with Paulo Freire, and now it's hyper. Well, I mean,
postmodern.
yeah, and really about the revolution. It sounds a little bit hyperbolic to say it, but that's what they're doing. And so
Well, that
the pedagogy of the oppressed is really a playbook, or it becomes a kind of playbook to destroy what I think of as civilization. So
Well, that the very point that I was mentioning about like taking the impetus away from things like social studies and history
yeah, right.
would kind of point to that, or
Yes, yeah, no, you're exactly right.
and I kind of intuited that, and I was like, just this kind of very uh surface level. Well, are we trying to erase history?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but I don't know how.
But actually, that knee jerk reaction, there's a real truth in that reaction that you had. It's the sort of the you know I would assume you're a pretty intuitive guy anyway, right? And so, there's something to that. There's something to
Yeah,
that. And so even the way that you teach history, that when I was a kid, we were sort of talking, you were talking about the great figures of history and that sort of thing. Well, that of course is totally verboten. So now you need to talk about social history and economic history and all that sort of stuff. So
it's
it's
interesting because when you talk about the great figures of history, it's almost like we're teaching from that perspective, almost like you're teaching myth, like or
oh
like
sure, oh
like a
one hundred
historical,
percent.
then I guess now that would be teaching, and what it is complicated because the American Revolution, that we were teaching about a revolution, and then now we have like a counter revolution or something.
Yeah, I think notice the way that we talk about the American Revolution now. So like, I was born in 73, so I was like learning about this in the late 80s and early 90s and there was still the sort of the narrative. I mean, we were just winning the Cold War and so there was a time, even though this would have sort of ruffled the feathers of maybe some of the educational establishment, we were we were coming out of the sort of the depressed 70s and Reagan and sort of winning the Cold War, and there was a sort of a rejuvenation of a kind of patriotic spirit, and so the founding fathers sort of became kind of cool again.
Mm,
And if you notice, it is precisely the founding fathers that have been attacked mercilessly in the last 15 to 20
yeah,
years, really going after those personalities. And I liken it, I talk, I liken it, every people has a mythos, every people has a scripture, right? Every people has an origin story. And I'm not surprised at all if you were committed to the work of the revolution of upending the sort of the bourgeois and establishing the sort of the proletariat. And again, I think people forget how on the nose that really is, but like that really is what the revolution's for. And I'm not surprised at all that they would go after the myth of the founding, right? And for me, understand, I'm a mythology teacher, so I think myth is good, and I think myth is true, and so those of us who watch the Pajot stuff, exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm not surprised that they're coming after those particular myths because those myths um, create a kind of heroism. They create a kind of shared story. And if you can tear down the heroes, you can tear down the story. And so, in a weird sort of way, I think that this is kind of like the work of, I think people do the same thing with the scriptures. So like problematizing Paul and who really wrote that and all of that kind of business, I think is a weird way. It's like studying chords on a page rather than listening to a song.
yeah.
You know,
And we're
it's like,
tricked. We're tricked, and it's an interesting trick. But
oh, it's very effective,
I
right?
actually was listening to Jordan Peterson talk to Alex O'Connor today. They had
Oh
a
man, it's on my queue. I wanted to
dude,
listen to it before we
it's
got here, but yeah, yeah.
dude. Jordan Peterson actually says like I think I believe that that Christ is the fulfillment of the law and of the prophecies.
It's like, do you now?
He
Do
said
you now? Wow.
he goes, I think that's true as he crosses his leg and keeps going.
I love it. It's like Jordan
But the
let's have
funny
a
thing
chat.
is, yeah, but the interesting, Alex O'Connor, he's been looking at the Gnostic Gospels
Yeah, yeah,
recently,
yeah,
and
yeah.
but to this point of the trick, and I'm not saying it's in his case necessarily. I think he's really evaluating a lot of things.
Me too. Yeah, no, I watch him pretty
Yeah,
closely. Not everything he does, but I think the man's sincere.
yeah.
I don't know. Did you catch him on the Unheard podcast with Justin Brierley
Yep.
and oh,
Yeah,
she
that was
was
crazy.
what's her name? Anyway, he's like,
Elizabeth Oldfield.
oh yeah, that's right, yeah, Liz Oldfield, and I'm just sort of I'm very struck by his like he's an honest broker. Like he's a
Yeah,
yeah. I've noticed that, and there's been I've noticed that change over the course of a year. You know, because he used to be pretty acerbic and pretty kind of almost almost a kind of like Dawkins et al. Knockoff.
yeah.
Um.
He's wanting to break that shtick. He speaks to it in this conversation
Okay.
directly.
Okay,
He
that's
said
cool. Yeah.
to just kinda get to that point, but he said, uh, "If you're always skeptical, it's kind of and all if you're always going into something to try to be right, like, it's
Hmm.
exhausting." He's like, I actually I think there's I can learn from everybody."
Wow, that's profound. I mean, that's really great, right? I mean, wow. And I that's right, because when he was being introduced on that Unheard podcast, he said something like, you know, I think they were introducing him as the, you know, the cosmic skeptic. And he kind of like he said, he kind of like nodded and he's like, yeah, like I'm really, you know, I'm
A rebrand, yeah.
rebranding my podcast and I'm just going by Alex O'Connor. And which, you know, again, it's like, ooh, that's interesting. That's a
It
tell,
is,
as they say.
and yeah, and but they were really digging in on the Jordan Peterson, "What do you believe? What do you
Yeah.
be like?"
Yeah.
And what do we mean by that when we say that? Do you believe when someone's asking you about scripture, and this is what I was talking about like, looking at history on a page, or you kinda made this
Mm,
shift from that to the how we kind of modern vivisection of the Bible.
yeah.
He said it's almost like the modernist Christians too are asking Jordan Peterson the same question that the eight they're both actually asking him the same question.
Hmm. Yeah.
You believe
Hmm.
this happened in history? And they both want him to say, the opposite answer, but they're actually both, like, obsessed with that part, did when someone says, "Did the Israelites walk out
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Egypt?" And I don't know. It was fascinating how granular they got onto this in a way that I feel like hasn't been as explored, in relationship to Jordan Peterson, and I'm sure Paul will he made a little blip on it this already, today, but here nor there, the I guess we were talking about this move to erase kind of this myth or the glory of the past, and I, these things do start in young minds and in education, and I
Yeah.
think I think about my kids and in the future, and, uh, I just don't even know what they will get or won't get. Maybe that I'm
How
too
how old are your kids,
I've
Christian?
got a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old.
Okay, so so I have a 17, 14, and 13-year-old. Um, yeah, yeah, I sort of wonder about this is, I bring my kids to church on Sundays and we pray at home and, do all that. And yes, and I have to say, just as a dad, like and I've said this on podcasts before, but I'll say it here. The only thing that matters to me is them in
Mm.
that way, right? Like I can't afford to take my kids to Disneyland. I, and all the stuff, and but I don't care about that. And even if they care about that, man, I really care about what they believe. And so even as I'm saying that out loud, like, what do I mean by that? That I care what they believe. Yeah, I mean, have you drilled down on that for you and your children, or like,
Yeah, the way that I've
yeah,
also, I mean, the all of them to some degree, like bedtime prayers,
mhm,
sometimes include the Apostles' Creed.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, 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 of course.
well, maybe of course, I'm
I
not
mean,
a
I'm just saying, like, yes, me too. I should say, me
yeah,
too.
so
Yeah,
but that that's been in my mind is like, well, what can I give them that's,
yeah,
you know, because I didn't actually get that. My
yeah.
some things are taken for
Because
granted.
because of your low church upbringing or
Yeah,
no church upbringing.
no low church, very,
Okay,
very much church upbringing, but the
got it.
Apostles' Creed would have been considered something like a religious like religion, not like faith.
Like an idol.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So
so
we're
go ahead.
we're Catholic, as you know, and so
Oh, yeah.
we're pretty scripted. You know, um and yeah, so it's interesting that you said it like that, because I felt that exact same thing. And like, what else can I give them? I mean, I can give them a cheeseburger, right? You know, and I can give them, you know, a pair of Uggs, you know, and I can give
Mhm.
them, you know, whatever, you know, the damn Lululemon shorts or
Yeah,
whatever.
we're speaking the same language.
Right? Like, so I can give them that, and to a, you know, but there, many people can give their kids way more of those, you know, things than I can, you know. But what I can give them is my faith, right? You know, like, I think my kids know what well, I know my kids know what I believe, you know, because I do my very best to live it out, you know. And for me, that's, you know, we, you know, once a month, well, you know, grab the kids kicking and screaming on a Saturday afternoon and go to confession, you know. And then we bring the kids to mass every Sunday, and we say the rosary, not as much as we should, you know, in the evening time, you know, and those sort of things. And so I can give them that. And I remember, and I'm like, you know, I'm going to make it. I'm religious about this, Christian. You know, it's, you know, I grew up in a world where, you know, if you're Catholic, you had to go to mass on Sunday. It was really a non-negotiable, and that was something that my mom and dad gave me, so that even like when we were on vacation, you know, let's say we were on like a big, you know, extended family vacation. Actually, there's a funny story. We used to vacation in Arkansas, up in Lake Gleason. I don't know if you know where that is, up on the right off the Little Missouri River, and we would go, and because, you know, Arkansas is not exactly the most Catholic place in the world, right?
No.
And so we would go, and all my extended family on my dad's side is kind of nothing. Like, they're nuns, and they've been nuns for a really long time, you know. And so we would go on these big family vacations, and Mike and Judy would take Kale, Josh, and Mark, and we pack up in the station wagon and drive
Lame.
2.5 hours, right, up some mountain for some outdoor mass that they were holding at a campsite, you know. And just like, oh, I can't believe I have to go, you know, all that.
Yeah,
But you know what? It's like, the thing that was conveyed to me is like, there
yeah,
is nothing more important than that, you know. And if you can make it in, you know, if you have to go, and if, you know, obviously if you can't make it, okay, but like, you
right.
really go out of your way to make sure you make it happen. So, you know, so I give that to my kids, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the first time um hearing one of my kids say the responses to the mass spontaneously, you know. And like, it felt really good. I was like,
Mm.
you know, I'm a pretty, like, I'm a loud guy, you know, like, so I'm like the guy in church who's like, make sure that everybody, you know, this is when we do the responses, people, right? You know, so
The
everybody
lay
always makes fun of
the
me. It's
the
funny. It's
lay
fine.
the lay liturgist out there in
Oh
the
yeah, yeah. I'm like, you know, anyway. So, you know, so my kids know that it's really important, and so I given them that, and so like, that makes me feel good.
yeah,
But I also, you know, look, I know the world they live in. I know the numbers. You and I both know the numbers. It's a wasteland out there, and it's not neutral, right? And I think Aaron Wren is so right about this, and you know, and it's not neutral. And not only is it not neutral, but, you know, to get dark here, you know, the demons want our children, like, they actually do. And so, what do you do about, like, what do you do with that? Well, you know, I have this prayer routine just like you have, and you know, but school is part of that too, isn't it?
yep.
You know, educating them, forming them in some way, you know. At least
It
it's always been that way for me, you know. And I teach at a Catholic school, so maybe it's a little bit more explicit for me in terms of the way that I see, you know, the world or something. I don't know.
well, I there is a caveat to, this. I live in a small rural town,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
that there's still, I'm in the Bible Belt.
yeah, yeah.
There, I would say probably like 90% of the educators would easily
Identify as Christian. Yeah,
that'd
yeah.
be, so
Yeah.
it's a, and probably have politically or, conservative and
Oh,
all these.
that's interesting. Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
so it's a different world, but at the same time, it's you're in an explicitly Christian environment that.
Well, my school, right? My school is a Catholic school, right?
Yeah.
And so it is explicitly
Mhm.
Catholic, but in terms of the clientele,
Gotcha.
it's not, you know,
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's a I don't even know how to I guess just even the little bits that I know that have been like that, for instance, of, 2008 or whenever it was that they made that legislation change, like,
yeah,
that's gonna affect my kids in the
yeah,
that
that's right.
and I don't believe they will get the same, amount or attention to things that I thought were at the very least interesting,
Yeah.
at the most important,
Well,
so
and no, it's so true, and I was listening to somebody the other day talk about education, and they were just talking about the how many kids are just really bored,
mm,
and my fear with that is that I think most adults can tell when kids are bored, but my fear about that is that they're going to use that they're going to they're going to look at kids being bored as an impetus to make education relevant.
yeah.
And
Yeah, like the Vatican II, like the
yeah,
contemporary, like that whole
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and
You know
again, you think about, right, that even just like in terms of like worship, right?
Mhm.
That, right?
Yep.
That you're forever chasing. And actually I've always been curious about that. And you're a great person to ask because you do it, right? Or and did it as a worship leader and a pastor and all that. Are you how conscious of contemporary trends in music are you when you do sort of the worship band
If
stuff?
you're the guy,
Yeah.
you're I mean, it's part of your it's implied you're gonna try to keep up. I mean, I haven't there's probably I've hit a ceiling on that. Part of it's age,
Age, right,
um,
right.
part of it's not thinking that churn is healthy.
Yeah,
Ultimately, I think there's some good songs that have been written,
sure.
but that churn and the way I mean, it's been an evolution on how that happened, but yeah, that the thing I guess to twist it is I
Mhm.
think so my 10-year-old, she's in like this program. She got into this, kind of like they've replaced GT, gifted and talented. I don't know
Mhm.
if you remember, like it's called
Oh, I
East.
remember that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
What do they call it now?
East, which and I don't know, it's at least in Arkansas. It's like education and something technology.
Got
Like
it.
so,
Throw
the kid,
technology in there, like, "Ooh, yeah, funded, funded." Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so she gets an hour out of class each day or whatever,
Mhm.
once a week or something like that to go do projects that they do community projects using technology and collaboration, and it's actually interesting. And I had this odd for instance happen where they were going on a field trip and the bus broke down. They were headed to St. Louis, and I had to drive and go pick up my wife who was on the trip,
Oh,
and then
jeez.
and there was like four adults left behind from this charter bus.
Yeah,
And then the another teacher from the school came up and brought them a minivan to take on. So I had to bring him back to
yeah,
where we live, like,
yeah.
and he's the East teacher. And
Okay, 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 yeah,
and
yeah.
I start talking to him. I'm asking him about technology in the school system. I'm
Mhm.
talking about how it works. An interesting thing I wanted to this was something I wanted to ask you about. You're kind of in this relatively classical form. You're
Yeah,
teaching the great works, like, and in this board to this point about board slash maybe a word could be like innovation,
sure.
you know, she he's telling me that, he's a facilitator
Ah,
more
yes. Yeah,
than he is a teacher for that. He
yeah.
facilitates these kids. And I had this thought of kids sitting around like a little like speaker that's
Mhm.
teaching them, that's an AI. And the teacher in there is facilitating, you know, the teacher's kind of facilitating, "Hey, but then these kids are in my mind." I'm just telling you what was going through my mind.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And then because there's like 4 little or 3 elementary schools in our town that are in the same school system.
So
And
they'll feed into, like, one middle school and one high school? Is that how it works?
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I was thinking and then that they could FaceTime somebody that else in that East program across town. If they were doing the same, they could I was like, "Oh, well, there could be something really interesting."
Like a collab, a crosstown
Yes,
collab.
and they've done some, but
Mm.
this weird idea of like, will education with AI, it would move towards that. And I think that my mind, as being coming from the really innovated side of church,
Yeah, yeah, right, right,
seems
right.
to kind of like think about that. And I'm not for or against these ideas, but that was something else I was wanting, AI education. If you'd been kind of thinking along those lines at
Oh
all.
yeah, yeah, gosh, I mean, I would say that I have moved from being tech open to now, like, I would say I'm tech negative squared. I remember early on when iPads came out, and I work at a school that has made the decision. It made the decision a long time ago, to be consciously to make the conscious decision not to be a one-to-one school, right? And a one-to-one school is which all the kids have laptops, right? And so we made the decision, no, like we're not. We're gonna kind of double down on be intentional about old school,
Yeah.
and I'm really grateful that we did that. And, I remember when iPads came out, I was interested in them because I like gadgets. And I said, I made a proposal to my boss and say, hey, look, people are asking us about the iPads. How about we, use one of my sections as an experimental section? So we did. So we bought the kids iPads, and, we did the whole year on iPads, and we did as much on them as we could do. And this is early on. So, we were getting new apps in the middle of the year and trying this out and trying that out, and all that sort of stuff, right? And it was cool. I'm glad I did it. It was a really interesting thing. But so I was asking the kids at the end, and I was, I of course I grew up before the internet, right? I completed. I say this. I've said this before, but I completed like a week or 2 weeks before I turned in my master's thesis. I got my first email address.
Mm,
Right.
man.
So, so like literally in that, so I'm turning in this massive, you know, bound copies of my master's thesis. And then I get, this email. That's so cool. Right. And um, so so everything that I read for my entire formal education was on the page. And so when the iPads came along, and Kindles had been around a little bit, but whatever, I wasn't really into that. But I thought this could be cool. So we did everything, every book that we decided to read, we did, on either Kindle app or the Apple Book app, and we did everything we could. Right. So at the end of the year, I'm asking the kids, like, so, well, what do you think? And every one of them is so interesting. Every one of them is like, I mean, like, I love the gadget. The gadget's great. But like, if I really want to read, I have to, I need a book, and of course I've done a lot of research and reading after that fact, and everything, you know, agrees, right? Screen reading is different qualitatively than page reading. And it's basically that everything on a screen induces an F pattern. You read the top line, you skip down to the middle, then you read to the middle of the middle line, and then you go right down to the bottom, right? Whereas when you read on a page, it's a Z pattern. And so, and when you read, you're reading the line and the next line at the same time, right? You're sort of
Mm,
pre-reading as you're reading, and so it's a way of kind of, it's almost like you, every time you read on a page, you're reading something twice, right? Because you're Z reading anyway. So at that point I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I thought I was just going to be the old fogey who was like, well, I don't like this, but the kids are surely going to love it. And the kids were, I had a pretty good rapport with the kids, and they were pretty honest with me, like, yeah, like, look, look, if you're going to give me this gadget, like, I'll take it, 10 days out of 10, right? No, no joke here. But really, so I was sort of skeptical at that point. And really what killed my any residual enthusiasm that I had for gadgets in the classroom was COVID. Having to pretend that Zoom and an LMS, were some kind of adequate substitute for what happens in a classroom. And in a weird sort of way, as awful and horrible as COVID was, and as horrible and awful as COVID continues to be, um, the one thing that it did is that it really slowed down the kind of confidence of the tech boosters in education. And so it'll be interesting to see how that thing kind of plays out. Now, that being said, they're never, Google Classroom and all this sort of things, I hate it. I think that the capacity of our kids to read is substantially hemorrhaging.
Yeah, I see that in
Yeah.
my own
Sub,
my
sub,
own world.
yeah, substantially. So that, and and I follow a bunch of educators online, Twitter, that kind of thing, just to kind of keep
Mhm.
abreast of what people are talking about. And like, you sort of expect Kale Zeldin to say stuff like this because he's a cranky conservative, and he likes old books and blah 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 blah, right? But I'm seeing, like Viva la Revolution English teachers who are like, my kids can't read. They need to get these screens out of the classroom. They're terrible. So that's true. Now you add on top of that, the obliteration of attention that the screen is heralded for our kids. And then you throw on top of that AI. And I'm at the point now where I just simply don't trust anything on a computer. So I've gone whole hog completely. I do blue books now. I don't know if you remember those blue books, but
Yeah, on tests.
yeah, test and writing. We do a lot of in class writing now, and I say, take out your pen, and here's a blue book, and here's the prompt, and I cannot give the prompt. See, here's the other thing: you can't give them the prompt in advance, right? Because what most folks don't know, but you and I probably do know because you fiddled around with ChatGPT, is that it's not really the finished essay that is the problem of ChatGPT. I mean, it does that too, and it does a pretty good job. I mean, you can kind of massage it into form pretty quickly. But what if you understand it, which they don't understand it, but really the bigger problem that I see is the idea generation and structure and formatting of an idea that Chat GPT can do, like that. And so, so if I give the kids a prompt beforehand, even like a couple of hours before we sit down to do the in-class work, they many, not all of them, of course, but enough of them will go and put it into the prompt, and they will get out an idea, a structure of an idea, and they can kind of jot that down, remember that idea, and then come in and sort of put something together. And well, then why am I doing this, right? What is the point of this? Because, and now to be clear, as someone who was raised in that, there is a real thing that happens when you have to sit down with a blank piece of paper or a blank non-networked page and generate an idea and generate text, right? It's
A
not that
blank non-networked page, I haven't heard that.
yeah. I don't know, just it popped in my head, right?
Like
Because
like micro something, a word processor that's not tapped into the internet, is that what you're saying?
exactly, right. And like, even so for instance, Chat GPT, et cetera, get a lot of the press. But if you fire up a Google Doc, it's very easy. Most of them might even come, I think, preloaded with Grammarly or some version of Grammarly, right? And it's one thing to have, if you remember on the old Microsoft Word days, you would see the little red line under a misspelled word, or I think it was a green line if there was some kind of grammatical issue, maybe. That's AI, right? And so, okay, that's AI. Is there a problem with that? It's like, well, honestly, no, not relative to the AI that generates. And so my focus is really generative AI is the real problem, because you just don't have to learn how to do anything. And when I have to sit down to write something, you know it's hard, as you know. But it's me. And it's not just I'm writing so that I can put something out on Substack. It's not just writing so I can try to get it published somewhere, but it's rather me coming to know the contours of my own mind. And that is what an English class is, in theory, supposed to do, along with teach you how to read and see code, symbols and patterns. But it's how do you find out what you really think. And if you're outsourcing that, then I don't know what the point of it all is. And so if there's no way to properly police that in a digital environment, then you know then you're being sourced, right? You're being used by the network, um, for data generation. You're a Yeah, so that image of the Matrix, we're all sort of plugged into the pod, immediately comes into my mind. So I mean, and I look, I have thought a lot about this, Christian,
Yeah.
and I don't see how education survives this, and it's just going to become, or maybe it becomes unmasked as a kind of mass babysitting.
That's what I was pointing to.
Yeah,
When I use that word, facilitator,
yeah.
um, because and I'm this isn't it's really well, I feel I don't know what the word is. I want to say awkwardness because for you to say that is different for me to say they're gonna take. That's you coming to this thing. Like, what is the? And I think that's the question is what's the future of education? With these generative things, which is, I mean, the thing that keeps coming to my mind, and we both play in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
corner
I know,
space,
I
and
know.
and it's interesting, like the yesterday's 15-hour live stream on Kale.
I wanted to jump on, I was just too
I
busy,
did,
but,
yeah, I was completely booked up yesterday. I
yeah,
couldn't
me
believe that
too.
but it but the interesting thing about that is contrasting that to, pardon me,
Yeah,
Zoom education
mhm,
versus these people that want to converse about ideas for
mhm,
12 hours.
yeah.
What's the
Well, desire is the difference, right? I mean,
yeah, and it is, and it's but part of it's the algorithm kind of getting people to this stuff that they're interested in.
yeah,
That the reason that those conversations even happen is because it was like this 5-year algorithmic, um, understanding of the user that got people all into this quote unquote same space. So I don't know how to. And the other piece I wanted to add into it just was the idea of becoming a more oral culture.
yeah,
That this is listening and conversing versus writing as much.
yeah.
Because
We're definitely becoming an illiterate. Like,
yeah,
we're really moving out of high literacy, you know, um, and you can really see that. Yeah.
what does that? But
What does that mean? Yeah,
what is the difference or even the benefit of becoming more of an oral society versus a literate
yeah,
society? Pre Gutenberg.
yeah, yeah,
But if the interesting thing though is that it was the writing that allowed information to pass more quickly,
yeah,
but now it's actually the kids that so naturally, like my kids that w- didn't take long for them to figure out, is easier to try to to voice text than to
yeah,
spell everything right.
yeah. Right, right.
Then which I don't want to make a complete judgment on that when there were,
Well,
I don't know.
right. So if something can be done via voice text rather than touch typing, let's say,
Yes,
um, you have to start to ask a
language,
tougher question. It's
language.
like, right. I mean, and what is it for? You know, what is it for? Is it make work? And I think that AI, one of the things AI is exposing is make work, right? And homework, make work
Mm.
homework. And but look, but the
Unpack
other,
that for me. I haven't heard that before.
well, it's like write a report on chapter 10 of Mice and Men. You know, why? Why am I doing this? Because well, I know
Because
what
you
it
need to learn to write, because in
right.
college you'll need to learn to write so that you can write your papers and that type of
so that
thing.
you can get your degree. And so that for then what, right? But
Yeah.
if but to steel man the argument is like, well, what does it require? Like if I'm actually going to write, let's take a pen and
Mhm.
7 sheets of paper, 7 sheets of loose leaf, and I take out Of Mice and Men and I read chapter 10 of Mice and Men, and then I sit down and I start writing, Lenny does, does this, and I'm
Mhm.
writing out sentences and I'm doing this sort of thing. Well, what it's doing there, right, is it's making you process information from your memory with a reference back to a part in another text, and I'm generating, right, I'm doing it, right,
And it's
and
coming
so
through your hand.
right.
And
And if you're really doing it, right, if a kid is really doing that work, then there's a benefit to it. And there's an underrated benefit to it. But if I can speak it, like, is that different? And if and maybe not. I mean, oral exams were a real thing, and there's nothing wrong with an oral exam. In fact, I have begun doing a little bit of that myself with my own
Mhm.
students. Um, but yeah, but if I'm speaking into Siri, right, and it's sort of typing all those voice to text stuff, what is it for? I'm not sure what it's for. I don't know, maybe this is connected or not, but like I jog in the mornings, and you know there are many times where I write myself emails when ideas pop into my head, just from kale to kale, right? And I write these things out, and so sometimes I'll voice do them. But for me, I'm writing those to capture an idea so that I can go back later on and capture it and build it out and turn it into an essay, or maybe it's an idea for class, or what have you. Um, but there you can see you can sort of see the ecosystem in which I'm using that for something. But if I'm just doing this to sort of turn in homework so that I can get a check or a check plus on a homework,
Mm.
you know, what is that for? If you're really going to do the work, yes, you know, but you know, for years and years and years, for instance, we've poo-pooed, memory work, right?
Mm.
It's like, oh, like like tell me when's the last time you heard the word memorization and wrote separate in a conversation about education in your lifetime. But every
Mhm.
time you hear the word memorization, it's like, well, it's rote memorization, as if
Right.
rote memorization is bad
I
somehow.
came okay, so I came into this, and I know we're coming up on your time, but
That's fine.
I came into this when I went back to school just over 5 years
Oh
ago to
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah,
become
okay,
a
yeah,
nurse,
yeah,
and, my last reference for education was memory, and I was pretty good at it, like, that
yeah,
was what
yeah.
helped me, was I memorized my multiplication tables, I could memorize vocabulary words, like, that was something. And
Were
so
you good with scripture too? Like, did you have stuff where
I'm
you
not
could kind of
like I it's probably because I'm not one of the I'm a song guy, not a Bible
right,
guy.
right, right, right. I got it. Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. That
I
makes
I
sense.
I don't know. I've had to as a Baptist evangelical, I was ashamed of how disinterested I was in
Well,
the scriptures and how much more interested I was in the in the songs.
mm,
But
mm,
but that's the songs are scripture. Well,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean, most of them are or coming or inspired by anyways.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I'm not a good chapter and verse guy. I did get my
Mm,
undergrad in biblical studies, but it was just that to give you that. But what I did okay at scripture memory, I guess, when that was appropriate at our little summer camps and stuff
sure,
at
sure.
vacation Bible schools, as they called them, and that stuff.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
could
yeah.
answer the right questions because I could remember the stories. I
Yeah,
was so
right,
good at
right.
remembering the story.
And that's how I work too.
So
Yeah, yeah, that's how
so
I work too.
this, when I went back to school, uh, I noticed that they weren't wanting us to memorize. They're like, we want everyone to get the concept.
Yeah,
We want everyone to get the concept." And I was like, "You can't understand the concept unless you can remember everything about it."
mhm,
They were like a physiological concept and why we would wanna do this. And I went so hard. I did really good in anatomy and physiology for this exact thing, but I also was, like, fighting for my life. I was like, "I can't I'm
I
having to
need
rebuild
this. I
everything."
need
Yeah,
yeah,
I have
right,
to. This
of
is
course.
where I'm getting all my self-respect right now, and so
Yep.
but I went and then when I got into the actual nursing program, they were like, "We're not interested in you, like, memorizing stuff." I was like, "What are you interested in me learning then?" I
Right.
didn't get I it was very hard for me to conceptualize that because I felt like if you and I experienced this as if I did get a rigorous understanding of the facts, then I had the concept.
Yeah.
And at least, and I don't, whereas if they're just like wanting you to kind of understand some concepts, but you don't understand the underlying physiology of it, I guess that it was just a I didn't see how people actually
Yeah.
really grasp the concept. I don't know how to, if I'm explaining this
Yeah,
clear.
yeah, no, no, no. I know. It's like you have to sort of start somewhere, right? And you're kind of, you need the parts to build the whole, but you need a sense of the whole in order to even begin to grasp the sense that the parts are meaningful, right? And so there's always a little bit of a race, like when you're teaching. Like think of it when you're teaching a language. You have to teach vocabulary and you have to teach grammar and verb endings and whatever language you're doing.
Conjugation.
Right, conjugations, etc. And then they're like making you translate right away. You're just like, what's going on? What's going on? And but you need to do all of that kind of at the same time because you're trying to like kind of get something going, right?
Mm.
Starting something, it is always the most sort of difficult part of a craft and part of a project, and
Yes.
and so I get it, but there's been such a weird downplaying of the role of memory and memory work in education,
Yeah.
for the same reason
Spelling
why
word.
I don't even know my daughter's cell phone number.
Yep.
You could hold a gun to my head and I couldn't tell you my daughter's cell phone number. But
What a
it
visceral illustration.
right, but it's right here.
Yeah.
It's right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
It says Hannah. That's her
Yep.
number. You
Yep.
know, and like, where's all that gone, and what is missing if I don't have this sort of stuff? How reliable? Sorry, how how profoundly must I rely on battery power, electricity in order to sort of navigate and negotiate? Well, if everything's working and everything's fine and we're plugged into the network, everything's great. But I always have that kind of sneaking suspicion that, well,
Google Maps.
what if it's not right? What if
Yeah.
it's not? And so I do think that, I have a nagging suspicion that the acoustic is going to have to make some kind of um comeback, versus the electric, or maybe the analog has to come back from the digital. Maybe that's a better way to say it, because we're like, what I'm noticing with my kids is that they're plugged in, they're sort of negotiating and all that. They're plugged in, but as soon as they're not plugged in, then they're really confounded. Right. So when I'm sitting there and I say, okay, like we're going to read 25 pages of Frankenstein, it's like, okay, now my kids at this point are now used to it because, I have, we're at the end of the year and we've been doing this kind of work, but it, for a lot of them, they do no reading, they have no kind of analog life at all. And, I know old people have been complaining about young people not reading for a long time, so I don't want to be careful not to sort of box myself in there. But I really am noticing some real shift here. As the kids, as the generations coming through are true digital natives. That truly have been staring at a screen since they were in third grade, second grade, first grade. It's I think we are not quite ready to have that conversation about what the implications of what you're talking about, of moving from a literate to an oral culture again. There's a great book. Actually should reread it. I haven't read it since college, but it's written by this guy. His name is Walter Ong. He's actually a Jesuit scholar, and it's called Orality and Literacy. And he talks about that kind of shift. It's a technological shift, right? And so I know a lot of people in the corner are comfortable. Vervaeke will kind of talk about these aspects of things, but the technological changes, birth cultural changes. And so we already lived through, one series of reformations as a result of, of the printing press. And I think that's a pretty good, approximation of what happened. And
Yeah.
I'm not really quite sure what and I should say, Christian, I think we are living through another set of reformations. It's
Yeah.
just we haven't quite figured out how to call it that yet.
It's not just the other one wasn't just a religious
Exactly.
reformation.
Right.
This
Right.
is
And
not
so
just a
That's right.
religious, or it's not just a techno. I mean, I think it's a religion. It's not just a technological. It's cultural.
Yeah,
It's religious.
yeah.
All of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think you and I would probably be comfortable, because we have these conversations. Like it very much is a religious conversation. It's just nobody realizes that it's actually religious
well, yeah. I mean,
because they're
there's
always
all
like, I
sorts.
don't go to mass, so I don't go to church. Like, well, yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. You
Uh,
know.
yeah, and even I think at the upper levels, there's talks of a lot of religious activity. Even if you might want to, someone might call it pagan religious activity.
Mhm.
Even in some of the people that are developing these technologies, because
Oh yeah, you know me, I'm all over this. This is like, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I yeah, like I think it's a neo-pagan demon cult. So, here we go. And I'm not even joking.
I
So,
know. Yeah.
yeah, um, man, I just feel like it's going to be really interesting watching what happens. Because in certain ways, and maybe you feel this, but there's nothing sort of more anxiety producing than like how do I raise my kids,
Yeah.
right? And remember that screens were sort of pushed in with no resistance. I mean, no resistance, because, well, if we want our kids to stay on the cutting edge, they have to have computers in the classroom. When I was a kid, it's because we don't want those damn commies to sort of to surpass us. And now it's like, well, I don't want my kid, to be the only kid who doesn't know, which is so ridiculous, right? I mean, technology is pretty easy to use, actually. I don't think you need to have a class on technology in at school. But I think that there's going to be a lot of surprises. You
Yeah.
know that what does it mean? Like
What does it
what?
mean to be rigorous? What does it that
Mm,
that's a word that comes up. Rigorous
yeah,
steady is
yeah.
what
I don't like that word.
rigor.
I must admit. Yeah, it's like rigor mortis.
Sure. Well, what is
You
it? What is
know,
the root of it? That to me, it just means like really hard work.
Yeah, that's what it's a stand-in for hard, right?
Yeah.
Right. That but I think it's funny that it's the same word we
Related to
use to
corpse.
corpses,
Yeah.
right? So um I mean, look, I think robust studies are great. If you want to call it rigorous, that's great. I think that kids should be put to the paces. I think they're capable of doing way more
I guess what
than we give them credit for.
I that the technology is just because I have the context for what I'm thinking about with that word is just everything that you were talking about, the writing process, the research, the old research process, even just having to go to a library. It took, oh, it was like, picking up a heavy weight.
Yeah,
And when you turn that paper in, it's because you've like taken up this.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I even got to do some of that when I was in college,
yeah,
especially the first time.
yeah.
Uh, with which was, we had a college email. Facebook was invented while I was in college for
Okay.
college. So it's like I'm at this other part of it where social media took off while I was in college.
Right, right.
And we I wasn't even getting digital grades. We were, we still were getting report cards when I
Core
first
guards,
at
yeah,
my school, my little liberal arts Arkansas school.
yeah,
They weren't tapped into that yet. Mid 2000s. And
yeah,
but it does seem, you know, um how do you with the technology actually reduces the actual workload that kind of is innate into physical objects,
yeah. The
picking
physical
up
workload,
books.
the
Yeah,
physical workload,
it's
yeah.
like going to the library, going down the aisle, finding the book,
Mhm.
using this Dewey
Yeah,
Decimal,
yeah,
like, and and now it's it's not even a Google search anymore. It's write me an essay on. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like that the steps to get to there have disappeared. Like the
Right,
digital.
right. Well, so it's interesting to me on that front. Like, if so take both of us, right? And while my example is a little bit more extreme because I didn't get my email and as I'm turning in my master's thesis, but like, basically your first run through education was still largely analog, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, word processing.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I
I
had I had very primitive word processors at
Yeah,
the end of my time. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wrote my. I should say that I wrote my master's thesis on a Mac, right? So it's not like, but we didn't have the internet.
yeah.
You
Nothing
know,
was. It was still very. fr You were plugged in at home at your parents' desktop in the
yeah,
bait.
right,
Like that
right, right.
was. You
So,
know,
but you and I have, we had to do that physical. work, right? We had to do the library thing and look at a journal, whatever. We had to do all those sort of things. And there's something about the friction of all of that that is formative. And when you can do everything in a frictionless environment, it's really hard to recognize like what's important, what's relevant, what's salient, whatever, word you want to use there. And, so I get this image of my own students, if they open up a chat GPT prompt, like how, what are they going to put in there? What are they going to put in there? And, because I don't know, like I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure what'll come out of it.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll be prompted by,
Well,
by what have you.
it's interesting how quickly, we forget how quickly I do it. These young minds adapt to that like idea.
Yeah.
Then they intuit certain things that we can't because
Yeah.
we're locked. Our grooves have been pretty
That's
set.
right. That's right. That's right.
So
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
I, I don't know. We don't have like an Alexa. We don't have like we've not done heavy. My oldest daughter has a cell phone that has like it's not a brick. It's a smartphone, but it doesn't have. It's got this program called Pinwheel, and it doesn't supposedly let addictive type apps be in their
Yeah.
app store.
Yeah.
So there's like no major social media and stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
has a backdoor and all. But like
Right.
you know,
Right. 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 Right.
but we're kind of uh, considering like all of this kind of low tech with our kids as far as
Mhm.
like, I mean, I don't even know what the scale is on that. We're not anti tech, but we're not.
Yeah, we're in that same kind of weird
Yeah,
nebulous zone. Our rule has been like they don't get a phone until they're midway through their eighth grade year. So for Christmas, that's kind of what we
yeah,
did. And we don't let them have any social media until
yeah.
they go into high school. And the only social media that we allow, for the first 2 years is not TikTok is
Instagram,
no, not Instagram. No, definitely not Instagram. The kids use oh,
Marco Polo.
not WhatsApp. Gosh, God, my kids are going to roast me on this one. Um, Snapchat, right? Because they use
Okay,
Snapchat as their primary social engagement, right? They're like physical social engagement. Hey, group text messaging and all that sort of stuff, right? So they use that all the time, and so we've been pretty, and we were the outliers. I have four
mhm.
kids, but fine. I know what I know. Um, so but we're not anti it, and I
Yeah.
have to like look at check my
What are we?
kids YouTube and
Yeah,
all that sort of
yeah.
stuff.
It is. It's complicated. I don't know. One
Yeah.
of the topics and we can kind of like round out on this. This is kind of
Mhm,
getting into more of the like explicit culture war thing, but I wanted to get
mhm.
your take on it. It was that guy. He was. Let's see. I have his name. Warren Smith, who was fired. He had like a.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. I just wanted to get your take on that. You tweeted about it a little
I
bit, but like
did, yeah.
culture at large. That's kind of it's a few weeks past, so it's old news now. But I don't
Well,
know.
he went viral about 4 months ago because he had this kind of really great, little.
Argument,
Yes,
logical.
yeah, yeah, not an argument so much as that he was, one of his kids had sort of said something like, "Well, J.K. Rowling is a hater or a bigot or something like that,"
Mhm.
and you kind of like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And it's just really a nice working the kid through, like, "Well, what do you think? Well, why do you think that? And what do you mean by that?" And anyway, by the end of it, the kid was like, "Oh man, I'm like, can't believe I don't think that at all, right?" And so it was a wonderful illustration of in the best sense of the phrase, critical thinking.
Yeah, and
Um,
it owned the left or whatever, like that.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. So for whatever reason, and of course he went viral, and I think he went on maybe Dave Rubin,
Dr. Drew
Dr. Drew, right? Oh yeah, that's what it was.
and Elon Musk retweeted something.
That's right. So anyway, lo and behold, he gets fired 4 months later, or non-renewed is probably the way to put it. But no, I think he might have been fired. And
Mhm.
like, what for what? Like you tell me, like, what exactly did he do? Well, I think you know he must have pissed somebody off in the home office, right?
You know
And
what kind of school he was at?
I think it was a public school. Yeah, it was not a private school. I'm pretty sure it was a public school.
Mm.
And to me, it's just like, it's just so interesting to me that, like, number one, the exchange was it went viral for a reason. Elon Musk can retweet stuff. I get it; it gets a lot of looks, but I mean, that thing went viral because he was doing something real, and
Yeah.
everybody could see it, and it was kind of a wonderful and humane.
Yeah.
But
Tell. Mm.
people, got exposed. I think other educators felt exposed by him, and, like, and it's like everything else, Christian, people get really petty, they get jealous, and all those
Mhm.
kinds of things. And
Mhm.
so who knows what who it ticked off enough to pull the plug on him. But to me, it just shows the the decadence and the corruption of the educational establishment. If that guy's not safe to teach in a school, then whatever school that is needs to be plowed under, because and I have no idea, like, what this guy's religious beliefs are, or his political beliefs. Like, what no, I don't care. It's really neither here nor there. But what I could see is he was someone who was trying to get kids to think on their own. Like, gasp, I thought that was the assignment. But apparently it's not, right? And I do think that those kinds of things really should be talked about more as markers or indicators, or canaries in a coal mine, because that exposes perhaps something else that's not being talked about. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, man. I felt bad. I mean, he'll be fine. He'll land on his feet. He'll get
I
another
think
gig.
he's got his channel
Yeah,
kind of, and
yeah,
he's trying to maybe do a counter education
yeah.
type thing.
Yeah,
So
and I think that it's that oftentimes happens, right? When somebody gets wronged like that, then it opens up a new opportunity for them, and I think that that's great, right? But when enough of that sort of stuff comes up, and I just don't know, man. I don't know why do parents put up with any of this garbage, right? I mean, I think that the parents put up with the garbage because they have no recourse. And what are they going to do? Like, yell at the school board? Well, guess what? The school board's probably filled with a bunch of people who, what are they doing in the school board, Christian? Like, you tell me. I mean, what's your local school board like?
uh, I know a few people
Yeah, maybe they're nice. I mean,
because
but
it's small. I mean, but people
again,
have
you're talking
reasons
about, look
why.
look look at your culture, right? Look at the
Yeah,
surrounding culture. That's, yeah,
people have reasons why they would want to influence. You know that's how
yeah,
it's power.
yeah,
Really,
that's true. Yeah.
um, and or control and one of those things. But I mean, there were a couple of thoughts I wanted to kind of get to, but
Go ahead.
I guess
I got a few more minutes if you want.
okay. So I've got two other pieces. One is bureaucracy in education.
Oh man, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Because I have I'm in healthcare, and so and it's not just education, not just it's
Yeah,
like
I know where you're getting at. I'm with you. I'm jamming. Go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So no, that's I mean I say the word, what comes to mind, that kind of
Well,
thing.
you were talking about hospitals the other day, right? What
Yeah,
did I see
the
somebody talking about hospitals?
conversation, yeah.
Yeah, and
That
that's right. And as you know, I'm very obsessed with McGilchrist's notion of the hemispheric brain, and the master and his emissary, and the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And I think that has a tremendous explanatory power. And my sense of it, whether we're talking about church, whether we're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about the government, whether we're talking about education, you name it, if there's a bureaucracy, there are always going to be forces in a bureaucracy that are going to want to let the emiss the emissary take over from the master, right? And so if something can be turned into a system, they'll do it. And the danger you always have when something gets turned into a system is that it squelches, what you and I would call like spirit or soul, right? It's like why do you and I hate a drum? Like, if you were playing in a band, like, why don't you just have a drum machine? Well, everybody knows that a drum machine's got no soul, right? And you want your bassist and your drummer to swing, right? And yet the drum machine's technically better. It keeps time perfectly. And so what is this weird thing, when you're performing in a live band, why wouldn't you want your bass player and your drummer to keep time perfectly? Well, it's because something gets lost in the systemization, right? Some vital, when I was growing up as a kid, around blues and rock and all this sort of stuff, it was called soul, right? That that it has to have something, which is easy, which is interesting, because what you really are talking about when you talk about, that guy's got soul, or this record's got soul, is that, we're kind of saying, like, actually there's like mistakes on the album, which is so cool, right? So
Hmm.
anyway, so when you think about, bureaucracies, and for healthcare, bureaucracies for education, and bureaucracies for churches, is that they always they have if unless there's not some sort of active check against the systemization for the sake of the system, then it's gonna hurt people, I think, because it's gonna take away that kind of that wiggle room, that humanity, that would save it from being, affirming,
To save
loving.
it from being a machine.
Right. So in healthcare is so interesting on this front, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure you see this all the time, but it's like, well, I'm not really sure how to code this thing, so it doesn't exist. Like, well, really, it just doesn't exist. Okay, it's like, or well, in order to get that thing approved, we're going to have to do this and this and this, but that's not efficient, and that's not going to, like, be aligned to our targets for X, Y, Z. You're just like, and meanwhile, you've got a person sitting on the gurney here, who's not doing well, right? And
To me, it has, from my vantage point, is it um it makes you uh more concerned about yourself than
hmm,
than
hmm.
the, because you're having to make sure that which there's always attention to, accountability.
Well, I mean, look, I have, like, yeah, right. Like, I mean,
But
I have grading periods, right? I have
yeah,
to grade those things, I have
but
to
what if,
align myself to those goals, I suppose.
yeah, but I just specifically with how you chart your care for the
Hmm,
medical record is,
hmm.
eh, it makes you, and even the bureaucracy, care more about what you chart than what you do.
Right. So it's like, right, what we'd say is, like, the map is more important than the terrain, right?
Yeah, and so
And
that, to me, I think that's the deepest angst for me.
mm.
And it kind of starts actually killing your soul. It's like, I think it's counterproductive in the long term, but that, so, like
So
you said,
how do you manage it then? How do you keep soul, right? How do you keep
um,
soul? How do you fight against the summum bonum of efficiency?
I come talk to Kale Zeldin.
Well, you welcome, brother.
That, I mean, I don't try to stack all of my identity into that job,
Yeah,
I think, which is not that there's not any, but I mean, I think that when I have the opportunities to talk to patients, sometimes my patients are intubated, but, like,
yeah,
to me, I think that's where I have the soul, is whenever I can sit and talk to a patient. Like,
yeah, yeah,
so there's, I don't know, but the bureaucracy thing, it kind of makes me think about the Dunbar principle or
yeah,
number, like,
yeah. The Dunbar number. Yeah, yeah,
because you get to a point, growth for the sake of growth, or for the sake of capital, or for the sake of, people are having experience when things are small and intimate. It's like, oh, yeah, this is great. Come on. But as soon as you say, come on, whether that's, we're going to grow this business, or we're going to grow
yeah,
this school, or we're going to grow this church or this hospital, there you lose a part of it for the growth. And but we live in our culture that says, um, there's actually growth is it's like the metric.
yeah, yeah.
And
You might even say that, that growth is the highest good, right?
yeah, it's the telos.
Yeah,
And I think even when you said you had your class size is 15, and
yeah,
whether that's because there's a financial um barrier that,
mhm,
or y'all choose not to, try to grow. I mean, that, I don't know what your school's kind of idea about getting bigger or expanding, or these ideas, if they don't purposely or whatnot. But
mhm.
um, it seems, I don't know. I just don't think that that's how we were made, or how we like ultimately. But the technology allows for a type of scale that outpaces humanity.
Yeah, I think about this. I think about this with my own work. It's like you know, I have 15 kids around a classroom, and we're talking about the Odyssey, yesterday, and what if I could get 1,500 people engaged with the Odyssey?
Mm,
And it's like, yeah, I think about that all the time. I mean, obviously there's loss there. What's lost? I don't know, but is there something gained? I think probably. So no, I think about this all the time, because in a weird sort of way, like what I do on a day-to-day basis is really inefficient, right? I mean, it's like it's just 15 kids. Um and but so anyway, I think there's some sort of interesting tension between scale, the human scale, and the
it's
sort of
that
scale,
can
right?
and should, can and should.
Right. Right.
I don't know. That's and this conversation can be, you know, lots. It can scale.
Right.
These conversations do
Right.
scale to more than two people, and your
Right.
ideas have scaled, and so, but just I don't know. I operated in something called the church growth movement in
Yeah.
evangelicalism. I mean, it's a real, and it's a lot of it's entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Rick Warren, Saddleback
Yeah.
Church,
Yeah.
like principles, and I don't know. I see when your identity is in it to I don't know. There's something to, or maybe salary or something. There's different things come into play, but um, yeah, I don't know. I had one
You know,
thought, but it's evaded
remember
me.
I remember listening to an old Eric Weinstein podcast back in the day, and he would he has all those little acronyms that he does, and he always talked about the embedded growth obligation, the ego, and I think
Hmm.
he was making a kind of
Oh, I
a
like that.
joke about that. Yeah, it's really good. It's probably worth going back and listening to some of those old Portal episodes. And he really talks about that. It's the kind of this unspoken driver that nobody really kind of wants to talk about, but it's there. And if the growth is not if the growth obligation is not being met, then like things fall apart in really bad, scary ways. But so you have to keep
Mm.
growing, you have to keep growing, you have to keep growing. Um, but like what I always wanted to ask, and he wasn't being like mean about it, I just was like, well, what else can we do? Like, how do we resist that embedded growth obligation? How can we resist the ego? I don't know, because it's clearly there. Everybody wants to grow, 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 and it means something's going to die, 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 die. I think. I don't know.
Yeah. So what that makes me think about is, participating on YouTube for the last 5 months and subscriber count and
Mm-hmm.
view count. Pardon me. And I don't have anything up here to drink today. But I was thinking, um, one thing that I'm interested in trying to do is actually monetize here when I get to 500,
Yeah.
and actually start like do smaller things with people that get in. And so, like,
Yeah.
instead of being like, "Oh, I'll never monetize," or "I'm not," not right when I turn 500, that'll look mammony or something.
Sure. Sure.
Like,
Well, I mean, look, we Christians struggle with this all the time, right? I mean, it's like Paul has joked before about the poor for Jesus route, and
yeah,
I think all of us struggle with monetization and grifting and and all that sort of stuff. And
I think Grim's kind of got I think he's got the right attitude,
me too. I
which
do.
which is to just say, "I'm doing this."
Yes. Yeah. Right. 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 No,
And
I agree. I agree.
and that's because I mean, what I used to do, which was people would contract me to come bring my worship leaderness
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
weekend, and they would pay me a money and my band, and I managed this band and I managed my brand. But I had to kind of felt like I had to, and it was like, I mean, it was important money for me.
Yeah.
It was like life, like
Yeah. Yeah.
actual.
Yeah.
I had
Need.
I needed this. So and and so I kind of, but yet I had this impetus that I did it, that I needed to not make that, um uh I didn't need to either talk about it, or it was awkward, or because I had to make sure that people knew that I was doing this for the right reasons.
Yeah, boy, I
Yeah.
struggle with this one hardcore, brother.
And so
I do.
I'm just, well, I'm trying to, that's my old I that was my career.
Yeah,
I was a contract musician for camps
yeah.
and weekends, and, paid musicians and all these things. So, as I've approached this, when we're talking about this growth, like, and I'm evaluating, well, what do I want to do with this?
Yeah,
What do I want to do with this? And I want to do more of this. I want to do more of this, but
yeah.
I don't want it to be, um, like growth for the sake of growth. What is actually growth? Well, relationship growth.
Mhm,
And I'm like coming up against a number, like, of like my email, or like how much I can respond to people. I'm feeling like this. Okay, this is starting to like get like hit a thing.
mhm.
And it's like right when I'm about to approach 500, it's like, well, what if I could get some people like within that, and I could then like, kind of do what Paul has been able to kind of do,
Mhm.
and say, okay, well, this, all monetization initially would mean is that it gives me like a marker and a small, and even for an investment for people to put a date on a calendar,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
say, let's, I don't know. That's what, and it to actually get smaller than try, I don't know. There's something I'm trying to like hammer out there a little bit. So, but I'm not. I've gone down the road before of feeling like I needed to be pietistic
mhm,
in how I did this, because I was a minister, I was a
yeah,
pastor, I was whatever. This,
yeah.
if I say anything else, then I'm doing this for the wrong reasons.
Right,
I
right,
and I, it
right.
just created something I didn't like.
Well, one of my old friends used to say, that, quoting the scripture, is a laborer is worthy of his hire. And I mean, there's a, and I think maybe there's too much hand wringing about this sort of stuff. It's like, look, make a living. I mean, seriously, like make a living, solve a problem for a person, and I think that everybody on TLC would say that TLC helps us solve a problem. And for some of us, it solves a problem that we need somewhere, somebody to listen to all these ideas that are kind of bouncing around in my
Yeah,
head,
yeah.
right? And so Paul has sort of become a node through which all of us are kind of solving the problem of trying to just talk it out, right?
He can't. I mean, he has there's a limit,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and then people. I mean, I've been doing this very long, but there's
yeah,
people like you that and others that have been doing this a lot longer,
mhm,
that have practiced that thing
mhm,
and can help. You're seeing. I've even been coming like now almost for half a year, and that whole live stream yesterday was kind of like there's new people coming up,
yeah,
and I got
yeah,
a
yeah,
comment by somebody on a video today that was like, I'm considering going to that Northwest conference, and maybe
yeah,
after that I'll come out of a lurkerdom and go onto a
yeah,
stream. And I was like, just
right.
go on now.
Yeah, it's going there, right,
But
right, right,
but but the I there are not many people that are going to continue to be able to get to Paul as
right,
that
right.
um I don't know. There's just
Well,
thoughts
look,
there.
but I mean, even with that, like, it's okay. Like, what would it have been like to meet Peter in Rome?
Yeah. Yep.
Everybody wants,
The Saints.
right? I mean, it's like I would have wanted to go see Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I had gotten there 3 months earlier, I could have like sat at the table with Peter, but it's 3 months later.
But
And
now I
so,
have to hang out with Peter's disciple, whoever.
right. And yeah, and like, there he is. He's like way over there, okay, but Peter affects a crew, and then that crew
Yeah.
affects a crew, and
And
it sort of
yeah, and
builds
so
out from there.
I guess what I'm saying is I want to take ownership of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not implicitly, but explicitly. I mean, and not that
Well,
I feel like I can do the work that Paul has done, but
yeah, you're gonna do a different thing, right? I
yeah,
mean,
and
you're
you
gonna
are
do a
too.
different thing.
And
You
you have
know,
too.
Yeah, and I think, to your point about Grimm, I think I like his approach, because it's like, yeah, like, this is what I'm doing, and you like this, you want to do this, like, participate. I need help, like, dude, I tune in,
Yep.
and so um, he's solving some kind of connection problem for me,
Yep.
that I can't quite put my finger on, but it's real, and so
Mm,
you know so So I guess I'm trying to talk myself into less hand wringing and more
yeah.
just doing it, and like the stuff will sort itself out if it,
And
and
if you do think about it too, that self-consciousness
yeah,
of it
yeah,
is if you make a mistake after you've done it, back it,
yeah.
you'll know it.
Sorry, yeah, exactly.
Back it, pull back or something.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're right. I think this is sort of a hyper consciousness that is not helpful. My mom, my mom, her prayer that she taught
Mm,
me, is like, look, and this is, she didn't make it up, but whatever. But I hear my mom's voice when this comes into my head, and it's just like, Lord, um, block it or bless it, right? It's like,
mhm,
block it if this is not the door you want me to walk through, and bless the door, and bless me to give me the courage I need to walk through the door you want me to walk through. And I just went through a personal situation, literally in the last 48 hours, where
mm,
that was my sincere prayer going into it, and the Lord, and that's what it was, and the Lord closed the door. And so I'm like,
mm,
okay, and like, I'm surprisingly kind of cool with it. You're like, okay, well, I mean, I would have been cool, I thought, to do X, but he doesn't want me to do X, and so I'm gonna keep doing. I keep hearing the song, like, Kale, do this. Go on to YouTube, like, make some content, like, do that stuff. You like to do this. This is great. And so, all right, well, then that seems to be, people keep inviting me on the talk, like you and others, and like, I really enjoy that, and I love mixing it up with people on Twitter and going on the live streams and doing that. So it's like, that's real, and I feel like I bring a certain amount of value to that, and so I'm going to do it.
yeah,
I'm going to do it and see what happens.
fist bump.
Yeah, right. Yeah, indeed.
Well, let's round this thing out
Yeah,
with
indeed.
I'm just gonna say with a point on education.
Mhm.
I'm gonna say these 2 words, and
Okay.
you kinda help me, or you give your thoughts on this. Teacher versus educator.
I mean, I always consider myself a teacher more than an educator, but I'm not really sure why I consider myself a teacher rather than an educator. Um, I teach, I prefer, if it weren't stolen by the colleges, I prefer professor,
Mhm.
because I see myself as being a professor of something bigger than me.
Mm,
Um, educator strikes me as like bureaucracy speak or something, and
okay.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's how it strikes me.
So what is it to teach? Yeah. What is it to
Yeah.
teach?
For me, it's to testify to that which I know, that
Mm,
which has been given to me. It's very, for me, it is inextricably linked with my faith, and that which I feel I've been blessed with, which is an insight into the way books work and stories work, and to bear witness to that, because it's a gift that has transformed me in the way that I see the world, and I think that that's what the world needs. So,
the world still needs teachers.
yeah, yeah, indeed.
Awesome, man. Well, let's
Yeah.
end on that, dude. I appreciate you coming on.
All right, brother. Be well. God
Right.
bless.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in and staying with us until the end of today's episode. Your support and digital connection is deeply meaningful to me. If you've enjoyed our conversation and believe that these conversations bring real value to your life and in this space, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. By doing so, you'll be helping me reach the goal of starting channel memberships, where we can continue building a TLC, this little corner of the internet sub community. My hope is to be able to further cultivate digital community on this channel, to be a space where kindred souls can engage in deeper, more intimate discussions and allow space for more private monthly tours, small group conversations. In the future, I hope to expand this endeavor further, taking yours truly conversation craft out on the road to have meaningful, embodied dialogue with individuals from various corners of the corner. Together, let's continue to build spaces that further foster connection, growth, and understanding around deeply meaningful realities. Thank you again for being a part of this journey. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.